Welcome to Depth of Field, an independent filmmaking podcast hosted by Dr. Mike White and Shelby Hagerden, independent filmmakers and industry professionals. Episodes will touch on recent films, the state of the industry, the regional scene in Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota, the occasional gear discussion, and interviews. Stay up to date with our current episodes on Spotify and YouTube.
Welcome to our late July, early August episode of the Depth of Field podcast. I am Dr. Mike White.
I am Shelby Hagerden.
And on this episode, we have so much to do. We're going to go ahead and, first of all, talk about a little bit about the upcoming film festivals for Iowa, Nebraska, and South Dakota. We are also going to talk about some of the darlings for the Venice Film Festival, which is coming up. Indeed. Also, our review of Kinds of Kindness, as well as an interview with our dear friend, Carrsan Morrissey. And she's been kind enough to be on our show. So we're thrilled to death to have her. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about the local festivals. Why don't you kick us off, Shelby?
Yeah. So upcoming right now, we have a lot of film festivals in September. So we're making sure that we get this to you right now so you can plan ahead to be there. So September 5th through the 8th is going to be the Iowa Independent Film Festival in Mason City and Clear Lake.
That's a terrific festival. We will be there.
Yes.
So we're going to be there screening The Cross. We're so happy to see all of our friends there. And that's a fantastic event. And by the way, they have a fantastic Mexican Cajun fusion restaurant in Clear Lake that you don't want to miss.
And there's a good donut shop there too.
Oh, there's a really good donut shop there. Mm-hmm.
And then September 13th to the 14th, we are having our film festival, the Depth of Field Fest, in Sioux City.
And we are so thrilled that we've been able to take almost all of the films that were submitted. So we're thrilled to death to have that. That's going to be at the Lewis and Clark Center in Sioux City. It's 100% free, and there are classes that you can take too, and those classes are free. So just register for the classes in advance. You can do that at our website.
It'll be really fun.
Yep, and you can find us on Film Freeway.
September 20th and the 21st is the Vermilion Vortex Film Festival. This is a new fest.
This is a first-year festival. It's in Vermilion, South Dakota. It's at the Dakota Twin Theater. Or I'm sorry, it's the Coyote Twin Theater. Yeah, I'm mistaken. The Coyote Twin Theater. And so if you are a South Dakotan, you might want to support this event.
For sure. And then September 27th and through the 29th is the Flatwater Film Festival.
This is a fantastic film festival.
We will also be there.
We are also planning to be there as well. I have many students that usually, are active in this, and I can't remember the city off the top of my head.
I don't either.
I want to say it used to be, I believe, in Grand Island, but no, that's wrong too.
Yeah.
I can't remember. But
we'll put it in the description if you're watching this. If you're watching the video, just look maybe down or to the side.
Yep, it should be a lower third.
Mike
so it
will
should
have
be
it somewhere
right on the bottom of the screen. It's for the location for that one. But don't miss Flatwater. It's going to be super fun, and it's going to be a great festival. It's usually dual screen, and they screen a ton of stuff.
And then October 3rd through the 6th will be the Sioux City International Film Festival. So this will be the second film fest here in Sioux City.
It is. Now that festival tends to be, it is an international film festival with more of a focus on international films more than local and regional. So that festival, if you want to see some great films from New York or from LA or from anywhere from around the world, that's probably your event. Okay. So for sure. All right.
Awesome. Let's get into Venice.
Okay. The Venice Film Festival is considered one of the top 5 festivals in the country, or not in the country, but in the world rather. This festival is one of the older ones, and we wanted to talk about just a few of the standout films for Venice. There were 26 competition titles. We are not going to go ahead, or I'm sorry, 26 out of competition titles. We are not going to talk about really any of those except for one American film, which is called Beetlejuice, directed by Tim Burton. Yep. If you are a fan, this was originally pictured from the 1980s. This is a sequel to the film with many of the same actors, including Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, Michael Keaton.
Yeah. And it's definitely a long-awaited sequel. A lot of fans have been looking forward to this. So going back, obviously, it's taking place, I think it's pretty much the same, like 30-ish years
Yeah.
later.
I think it's present day.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so after a family tragedy, 3 generations of the Dietz family return home to Winter River. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter, Astrid, accidentally opens the portal to the afterlife.
This has been a much anticipated film. This was really a sure bet.
Mm-hmm.
Something that you'll find, Venice really has kind of a relationship with Warner Brothers. So you see a lot of, you will see Warner films often that will screen there in advance,
Yeah.
you know, that are out of competition. This film is going to have a good following, and this will be kind of the kickoff release of this picture.
And I think it'll be a really fun screening too.
It will make a ton of money.
It will make so much money. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, these franchisees.
It will make money off of me in particular.
It's a really recognized title, and it's one of those that, you know,
It'll be fun.
Yeah, it's really recognized.
Yep.
There were 21 competition titles, and of these, there is the very anticipated Todd Phillips film.
Yes, so Todd Phillips' film, which is the second Joker. It's Joker Folie à Deux. So Todd Phillips is an American film director. He began his career in 1983, directed films in the 2000s such as Road Trip, Old School, Starsky and Hutch, and School for Scoundrels. Joker, Joker's a known quantity. People loved that film. It was incredibly popular.
Mm-hmm.
I think I am really curious what the audience is going to be and if that will change, because the audience for Joker did become a very specific demographic. But with Lady Gaga in there and with it being more of like a musical, I think it's going to be really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's still loosely based on the DC characters. Joker, Lady Gaga is joining the cast as Harley Quinn. So I think it'll be really, really interesting.
It brings back Joaquin Phoenix for the picture as well. It's a little bit of a strange genre bend because it's a musical psychological thriller film. So it's very anticipated. Again, another Warner Brothers picture.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be from Warner because of course Warner owns all of the DC, franchise. So that'll be interesting to see how that works. I assume this picture will do incredibly well.
Yes.
Male audiences especially really love that Joker character. This, and also with Lady Gaga, this may be able to bring in some more of that fan base as well.
Well, and I'm really interested too in some of the musical aspect of this, because the way, like, we've heard it described so far, we haven't heard any of the music from the film, obviously, but
I think they're probably holding it back.
Well, Lady Gaga has spoken a little bit about it, and it sounds like it's going to be less like all of a sudden we're jazz hands and kicking off into music, and more something similar to The Umbrellas of Schoenberg, where we have the dialogue is sung, or recently we saw that with Leos Carax's film Annette, where I think we're starting to go back. I know Noah Baumbach has been working on something very similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Which will hopefully be coming in the next few years. But I think we're starting to move into that realm for musicals. So I'm really curious to see what this is going to sound and look like.
This is kind of a hard sell for me. I'm not a giant lover of the Joker character in films. Mm-hmm. I'm also not a lover of musicals as a rule.
But I do like Harley Quinn's character and things.
But I am a fan of the production design. I am a fan of some of these other things that the picture could bring. I don't know. It's one of those that I'm sure it's a great picture. I just don't know if it's like for me.
I'm excited about the musical aspect of it. I think it'll be interesting.
Awesome.
Anyway, next up is Luca Guadagnino's Queer. Luca Guadagnino, of course, I think if you're interested in serious cinema at all, everyone knows Luca Guadagnino. His films, Call Me by Your Name. We also have, I could go on and on about all the fantastic recently
pictures.
Just had Challengers. A couple years ago, we had Bones and All.
Bones and All,
which was shot in Nebraska.
Yes. This film is a historical romance film. It's based on the 1985 novel by the same name by William S. Burroughs, the great, great novelist. Yep. It's set in 1940s Mexico City and follows the outcast American expat, played by Daniel Craig, who becomes infatuated with a younger man, Drew Starkey. So this film will definitely be an important picture.
Yes.
And I can't remember who the production company is. I want to say...
I can't remember.
I'm not sure. rather than guessing.
We'll add that in there. So.
Try to add that if we can. The next picture is Pablo Larraín's Maria. Pablo Larraín is a Chilean filmmaker. He's known for some other films. No, Neruda, Jackie, also Spencer, which is a picture that you were talking about just recently. Yep. Maria is a biographical drama film about opera singer Maria Callas. This, I've watched pretty much all of the trailers for this picture. To me, this is the picture that stands out to me most of all of the pictures at Venice.
But Larraín, he's proven, because Jackie and Spencer, especially,
they're great films.
I mean, they've done incredibly well. I mean, this is somebody that's really able to take strong women in history and put them in a really, really interesting light and show their stories through kind of a female gaze, which is very interesting considering his perspective. But I
really would not be surprised if this is that picture is the big darling of the festival.
Well, and especially with the success from Spencer a couple of years ago, I think this will be something special. Next one. Pedro Almodóvar's The Room Next Door.
We are big Almodóvar fans.
I love Pedro. He's wonderful.
I loved his last picture. What's the name of that picture? It's the two mothers, the parallel mothers.
Parallel mothers, yeah.
Loved that picture. We got to see that picture in Sioux Falls at the State. What a fantastic venue to see that picture.
Wonderful.
Really, really good movie. Really enjoyed it. And there's always a surprise in Almodóvar films. There's always a twist, and really great.
I will say, I don't know if it's still on, but there was a really wonderful exhibition in LA at the Academy Museum, and I went to it twice. It's fantastic. They go through a lot of Almodóvar's influences, and then also kind of like the parallels between what he's really loved versus like the things that he's showcasing in his films. It's a really, really beautiful exhibition. I recommend it.
And you don't have to worry about subtitles. This is an English film. This is his first film in English.
With Tilda Swinton and Julianne Moore.
Oh, who we love.
We love both of them.
Yes. So I think it's going to be really hard to go wrong in this.
Yes.
He had done a ton of work with Penelope Cruz, who I love in pictures. It's really great to see him making this bridge into English language films. And I expect this to be a powerful film.
Yes.
So it's going to be really great. So anyway.
So then last we have Brady Corbet's The Brutalist. So Corbet is an American actor and filmmaker. He's known for playing Mason Freeman in the film 13, Brian Lackey in the film Mysterious Skin, Alan Tracy in the 2004 film Thunderbirds, and Peter in the film Funny Games. He also has made many guest appearances on many television shows. But this is his he is the writer and director of this film, The Brutalist. The screenplay was also co-written with Mona Fastfold.
Okay, so here's my deal. I'm going to be really straight about this.
I think the cast looks incredible.
It does. And then I originally saw that he was making a film, and I was doubtful. But all of the writers are really anticipating this picture.
Yep.
It sounds like it's going to be a dynamite film. So my skepticism is kind of gone. I think this is actually probably going to be a really great film.
And one of the things too, so the film chronicles 30 years in the life of Laszlo Toth, a Hungarian-born Jewish architect who survived the Holocaust. For me, it feels very similar to one of my favorite films, Never Look Away.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited about. I love those films. I love that post-World War II atmosphere. Same thing with Cold War. I love those films. So I'm really excited.
The Pianist.
Yeah. And it stars Adrian Brody, Joe Alwyn. I mean, there's a lot of big names that I think is really going to help bring this one to the top.
I went from skeptical to excited about this picture.
I'm excited.
I know we only covered 5 of the competition films, but these were the ones that really stood out, at least to me, after reading everybody's upcoming stuff. So let's see what happens. We'll kind of see what kind of results have. Yeah. And then look when you see these pictures come up, look for your opportunity to watch them and read those subtitles.
And we will hopefully do some reviews on those after we're able to see them.
I hope so. So speaking of reviews, let's get to a film we've been waiting for.
Kinds of Kindness, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos.
Okay. Full disclosure. I did not go to this film for about 2 weeks because here it was scheduled at 9:00 at night, and it is a 3-hour film. We
Yep.
didn't get home till like 1:00 in the morning. It was ridiculous.
It was great though. I think honestly that's how the film should be watched. I think watch
At
it
9:00 at night?
Watch it 9:00 at night in the theater. So it's dark and terrifying when you leave the theater afterwards and you feel like you need to run to your car. I think that's the right way to watch it. I think Lanthimos would appreciate that.
Yeah. It is a strange picture.
Yes.
It took me a half a day to figure out if I liked it or if I just liked parts of it. Or
I disagree. I liked it immediately.
Yeah, but you like weird pictures.
That's true.
So, I mean, that was kind of the thing.
It's experimental and odd and fun.
And it's a strange film. It is
Yeah.
3 vignettes.
Mm-hmm.
And really, honestly, I felt like the vignettes were so strong that each of them could have been a movie of their own. If you had padded them out, they could definitely have been a movie of their own.
Yes.
But it's fun like this. It's a fun format.
I like that. It's structured as a triptych fable, which is the 3 vignette structure, but
Yep.
they're all tied together by kind of a common theme.
And you love that.
Yes, that's a very
That's one of your favorites,
that's a
is the
very
vignette style.
Shelby
Mhm.
storytelling thing. But the 3 stories revolve around a man who tries to take control of his own life, a policeman whose wife seems to be a different person, and a woman who searches for someone with a special ability.
Okay, so let's back up the truck a little bit. This was co-written by Ethemis Philippou, who is a Greek writer. He co-wrote Dogtooth. That was back in 2009.
Mhm.
Alps in 2011. The Lobster, which is probably of those pictures one you're most familiar with, in 2015. And then, of course, the fantastic film The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is a wonderful,
Incredible.
awesome film,
Yeah.
which was a A24
Yes,
distribution,
They also
yeah.
distributed The Lobster as well. I believe.
Yeah, I think they did too.
And those 2 were also nominated for Best Original Screenplay.
Yeah, I mean,
for
he's
The
just
Lobster.
a heck of a writer.
Yeah.
The cinematography was Robbie Ryan.
Yep, bringing back Robbie Ryan, who also worked with Lanthimos on The Favorite and Poor Things. And he'll be coming back with Lanthimos for the next film, which is shooting right now, I believe. I think they started production in July. And that film is called Begonia, and that's going to be coming out hopefully November 2025.
And Robbie Ryan is a fantastic cinematographer. He has done a ton of work with Noah Baumbach.
Yep.
Really does a lot of work in shooting on celluloid and shooting on actual film. He did the Meyerowitz stories, Marriage Story. I could go on and on, but he's done a bunch of stuff, including American Honey.
Yeah, he also has a really long-standing relationship with Andrea Arnold and shot Fish Tank, Wuthering Heights, American Honey, and Bird for her. Bird is a special one because Bird was one of the... While it didn't really perform well as far as a jury goes, it was people's favorite at Cannes.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about seeing that film.
I didn't know. I guess I never put that together, the Andrea
Mhm.
Arnold connection. That is very clever.
Yes.
That was a good note, Shelby.
Thanks.
Thank
But
you.
yeah. And of course, this film premiered at Cannes 2024 in May.
Okay. So, the 3 stories.
Yeah. Well, we just talked a little bit about that. So the first story around a man who tries to take control of his own life.
That is a bizarre thing, kind of about control.
Yes.
And about really what it's like to have an authority in your life.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting idea of control too, because it is the idea of we want to be free, but once we are free, we want to be back in that control. Willem Dafoe is really fantastic in all of these, and I thought really especially in this first one and
William
the last.
Dafoe is so creepy in this vignette. It is mind-boggling.
Yeah, because he basically he's in control of this young man's
and
life.
it demonstrates his range.
Yes, and everything that has been in this man's life for the last 10 years has been because of Willem Dafoe. So down to his marriage, the fact that his wife can't get pregnant, everything.
And he does, his wife is not having children because of this.
him.
Yeah.
So it's
amazing.
It's really fascinating. And then the second one, a policeman whose wife seems like a different person. This follows a woman who is a scientist. She gets stranded on an island. And then when they find her, they bring her back. She is a different person. But there's odd twist in this.
This is, and we won't give it away. This thing freaked me out. This was the mind-bendiest thing. There's a lot
I
of
loved this
very brutal violence in this. This was probably the strangest thing I've seen in cinema in the past 12 months.
Yeah.
It was bizarre.
This vignette made me want to vomit, but then immediately made me want to laugh.
I think it was my favorite vignette in the film, even as troubling as it was. Yeah. It's a must-see.
And this is also, this vignette too, I don't think it will be immediately apparent what this vignette is or what's happening to a lot of people.
It's so bizarre.
So definitely after you watch this, reflect on that second vignette. It's very, very important, really eye-opening. And then the third one, a woman who searches for someone with a special ability. So this is, she's looking for somebody that can bring someone back from the dead.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. And this film is really the thing that is tying all of these pieces together. Again, Willem Dafoe, fantastic in this role. Unnerving, but also nurturing. There's so much to it. It's a cult, and it's
and the end of the picture is interesting because they are loosely connected together. The vignettes. It is kind of the thing of, I don't know if you're familiar with Krzysztof Kieslowski. He made 3 films called The Three Colors, and at the end of the third picture, there is something that loosely connects all of the vignettes together. Yeah. So it does have this very Kieslowski-esque.
Well, it's the triptych fable, which is the standard.
It's very fun, and I think it's terrific. I mean, not nearly as powerful as the end of Kieslowski's film, but
I think it's
still,
very different because
very different
I think one thing with this film is go into it with a sense of humor. I think if you take it too, if you take the darkness out of it too much, I think you're going to miss a lot of the humor that's in it as well.
Okay. I have such a hard time finding humor in this because I'm so disturbed all the time. This is one of those things that's like, oh yeah, it's just a macabre comedy. It's like, this is troubling. You know, I have such a hard time getting through that. I think that's maybe one of the reasons, like, comedic horror films, even ones from the 80s, I have a hard time with.
I think this is
because I don't take any of it lightly.
This is really interesting though, because I think especially having Emma Stone's connection to it.
Yeah.
Because Emma Stone does a lot of comedy and she's fantastic at it, and her physicality is incredible, especially really in this film. But seeing that between Poor Things to this, because Poor Things also has a ton of comedic elements to it. And this one is similar in the comedy that we see from Emma Stone.
Yes.
But in a way that it's not outwardly telling you, hey, laugh at this.
Yeah.
It's just, this situation is funny-ish. If you told it to somebody else, it would be funny. If you're experiencing it, it's horrific.
And I want to talk about something that we mentioned prior in the show about Emma Stone. I'm loving her as a producer.
I love the films that she's picking.
She's producing smart films, and these are artistic, smart films that require really demanding performances. So I'm loving that she has grasped onto smart independent cinema. I love it all day.
The people she's working with are great storytellers. She produced the upcoming Jesse Eisenberg film. She produced Julio Torres' film Problemista, which we talked about.
Such a funny
which is
film.
A great movie. And then she also produced Kinds of Kindness and Poor Things, and is producing the upcoming film for Yorgos Lanthimos, Begonia, which she's also starring in. She's really finding, I think, her place as a producer. And it is that kind of offbeat comedy. It is some horror. It is, it's surrealism. It's fascinating.
And in mass distribution, AMC theaters screen this all over the country. Yeah. So this is not just an art house picture. This picture had a $15 million budget and then ended up with mass distribution, which I'm thrilled about.
Well, and especially if you have somebody like
for a
Emma
3 hour indie film.
Well, and if you have somebody attached to it like Emma Stone, you can have that, which is really cool that she's like, this is art house and we're going to push this and I want people to see this. I love it.
I love this picture, and I love that she's been doing these pictures like Poor Things that are smart indies that can see that mass distribution. And that's great. That brings smart cinema to wide audiences, and I love it. I love it. I love it.
And also on that note, for production, it took no time to make these. It took 3 weeks to complete. Filming was scheduled to take place between October 24th and December 16th, 2022. They shot within 3 weeks.
That's like
that.
18 production days.
But it's also a repeated cast. Not a ton of locations. Some locations are reused in it.
They look like inexpensive locations.
Inexpensive locations. A lot of places. I think there were several. A lot of them around New Orleans. I think there was a couple of places maybe in LA, but I think it was great. And just to be able to bring this together, so as of July 25th, the worldwide gross was 12.3 million. The budget was 15 million.
So it's going to break even?
I think it's going to break even.
And then, of course, that's probably without international market.
That is with international.
It's without international. So with international market, it'll do well.
Yeah.
These kinds of pictures sometimes do much better outside the U.S. than inside. So that this film's definitely going to be, it's definitely going to be in the black.
Yep.
So,
my main recommendation, if you go see this film in theaters and you can't pause it, go to the bathroom first.
Yeah, I had to take one bathroom break because it's a long time. Don't order the large soda. Maybe get a medium.
Recommend going right after the credits or the previews and go and fill up on everything. Get tons of popcorn because it's 3 hours long and you want snacks the whole time. So
yeah, sounds great.
Really
okay,
fun.
Awesome. Well, this was fantastic. Let's move on to our next segment. On our next segment of the Depth of Field podcast, we have our dear friend, Carrsan Morrissey. She's decided to join us this evening on our show. Carrsan, thank you so much for being here. We've been friends for a long time, and we're just thrilled to have you on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We just had a really terrific time. We got to watch the Salvages and had a lot of fun. And there was a lot of moments that we were like, what? What's happening? Right? So it was really, really fun. We had a really good time. We watched it on our big 70-inch TV that we have in the other room. Which was
very fun.
Which was a blast. So
awesome.
We had a really, really great viewing experience with it. Congratulations on the film.
Yes.
It's a terrific film.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we had a lot of fun doing it. So first of all, we go back a little ways, but I wanted to go ahead for the people who've not met you before. I wanted you to talk about how you started filmmaking and how long you've been active as an Iowa filmmaker.
Yeah. Really, well, first of all, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here, be talking to you guys. Really, I mean, I've been making movies since I was old enough to hold a camera. Like classic story. I started when I was in grade school with like taking a camcorder and going outside with my friends on a weekend, and we would just like make stuff up and film it and edit it and then like show it to our parents. Like that was what it was. And it wasn't really until like junior high I started to like watch more movies and be like, I could do that. Like I could do that like for real. And I'd say what really got me into like serious filmmaking, just in the idea of like making things to show people, was actually my high school did a film festival, and I hadn't made anything in a couple of years at that point, and I was like, I used to make movies, I'll get into it. And really ever since then it's been nonstop. It's my entire kind of purpose. It's what I love to do. I kind of came into the more public scene right around 2020 actually, was when Gorgon, a short film that I made, got into the Iowa the IMPAs, the Iowa Motion Picture Awards. So that's kind of how I got into like the Iowa film scene. I'd had a couple of films that got pretty successful online before that, some fan films that were pretty popular, which is a whole other era. But really, like for the stuff people know me for now, for that kind of work, that really started within the last like 5 years or so.
And because like obviously you have an incredibly long history being a filmmaker, and I didn't know that you'd started so early. That's super cool.
Literally just since I was a kid.
I'm gonna want like a little like special screening now of like little kid Carrsan movies.
Most of them don't exist anymore. The ones that do some are track downable, but most of them don't, because most of them were just on DVD. Like we would just like put them on DVDs from our computers, and like those are long gone. So
since The Salvages is like the most recent public work that we've seen from you, can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind that film, especially right now, like what you're working on right now? What is really the inspiration coming from in your work currently?
Yeah, essentially I'm known for dark, depressing horror films now, which is all I could ever want in the world. But The Salvages in particular, I was really inspired by Caravaggio's painting Judith and Holofernes, which is like the beheading of Holofernes by Judith. And also just kind of inspired by like religious stories of women in general and like how they're typically portrayed in those kinds of stories. And what moved me about Judith in particular is that even in the original text, like it's not quite what it is in the Salvages, but in the end she beheads him. And for a biblical story about a woman, you usually don't have it end with her physically killing the male antagonist. That's not really a common thread in most of those classical stories of that type. And I'm very fascinated by religion as a concept, just like on the kind of human fascination with what we don't understand. Cosmic horror is my sort of broadest genre, but in the context of things that are outside of our understanding that aren't necessarily good or evil, but just simply are, and the effect that they would have on us. So I sort of took the story of Judith, took elements from that, combined it with this sort of cosmic horror apocalypse storyline I've been playing with, which is Skyquake, which is I describe it as like color out of space, but with sound. Basically just this kind of unstoppable sound from this mysterious source that's driving people mad. So taking a sort of established story, putting my own spin on it, and then also kind of using it to tell my own story about feminine empowerment and power dynamics, that sort of thing.
Shelby and I travel a lot, and we go to art museums everywhere we go. And we were able to see the big Caravaggio painting they have in Kansas City at the Kansas City. You're nodding like you're familiar. And it's such a cool thing to walk into that room and the presence of that painting and the masterfulness of it.
Yeah.
I can see where you're drawing inspiration from that. Sure. Expand on that. Do you get a lot of inspiration from still art?
I would actually say for my cinematography, or kind of for my visual language for my films, I get the majority of my inspiration from still art and from painting. Yeah. I really like... There's a certain drama in those images, like capturing motion and light and emotion that I really enjoy. And I think that for me, film is a chance to explore extremes and to explore kind of the hyperbolic extreme versions of small moments. So like, obviously you can make a film about trauma, but you can also make a film about the end of the world that's also about trauma. And I find a lot of that in like classical paintings, particularly Caravaggio, to be honest. His work in general is a huge inspiration for me. I'm also a huge lover of low light, or like kind of like that like one direct light source on a figure, which I'm sure you've seen in pretty much everything I do. And even now, my next thing that I'm working with a cinematographer, but I'm working with a cinematographer that I chose specifically because of their work on low light projects. So like I'm still trying to keep that visual language. But yeah, I think that classical art has a lot to teach us about form and about emotion. And I also think it's a way to get visual inspiration for my work that isn't just copying other films. So
that's such a hard thing. I mean, of course, I'm a film professor, but when students develop their decks, and we just had an episode about how to develop a deck, one of the things is I always say, consider still art in there. And it's very interesting. And I don't know why this is. It's like a lot of the guys don't do it, which is very strange. And I don't know why that is. And then if we look at like Greta Gerwig and a few other folks, I start to think about their decks, especially Sofia Coppola, the big inspiration, Agnes Varda, the big inspiration of still art. So I appreciate that in this as well. But since we're on the subject, could you tell us a little bit about the production of the Salvages? How long did it take? What were shooting days like? Just give us a little bit of backstory on this production.
Yeah, we shot the majority of it over about 2 weekends. And really, I mean, it was as bare bones as it looked. You know, it was mostly just me and the two principal actors in a room. And then we also had Stephanie Schneider, who was our intimacy coordinator and who is just an absolute miracle worker on set, both as intimacy coordinator and also just kind of as another pair of hands. But she's brilliant. But for this project in particular, you know, I kind of intended this to be as simple and stripped down and just bare bones as it could be, because one, I thought the story kind of called for that, and two, it was just kind of a chance to experiment and play with tone and with a style of filmmaking that now I kind of want to take to another level. But yeah, it was very simple. We honestly had a really good time filming it. For as dark and dreary as the movie is, we had a very, we were all friends already. Like Joe and Jay, who played Holting and Judith, had worked together before, and we get along great. Jess, who played Abra, is a good friend of mine and is every bit as like funny and charismatic in real life as Abra is as a character. So we kept it really light. We had a good time, and we really emphasized the pacing. Like that's something I'm very obsessive about actually with dialogue in my films, is leaving room to breathe and letting conversations play out naturally rather than like forcing a certain element of speed. And we just kind of let the scenes play out. We would rehearse everything like 2 or 3 times, then just record it. But it was very simple, very fun, very flexible.
We had Joe Frenna on a recent episode, and I had never met Joe. He's a super fun guy.
Oh, yeah.
And he's actually, I'm doing a table read for a piece of work that I'm doing, and he was like, Mike, I'd really like to do this. So he's going to read for me coming up for a table read of The Painter. And he's just a super guy. I'm really excited to kind of play with him a little bit.
It was a funny thing, too, because...
Sorry, he's a phenomenal actor was all I was going to say. Like, just a phenomenal performer.
This is so funny we're doing this, though, because Joe talked about you. I think it was either on the podcast or afterwards.
Yeah.
I was like, I love Carrsan. Carrsan's so wonderful. So I love that this is happening. This is great.
Oh, yeah.
Just everyone's seeing each other's
Joe is great.
Yeah, it was really fun. And I liked his picture. His picture was really... really fun, and we had a talk. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but we had a really good talk about how it felt like those pictures that were done like at the very beginning of the advent of digital cameras.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kind of like, friends on the weekend, make it a movie. It had that real feel to it. It was crazy fun.
Well, and he's another one that he wanted to make a film, and so he made a film. And obviously, he's an extremely talented guy, and that helps.
Yeah. He told the funniest stories. He just was like, I didn't have a clue, so I just did it.
Yeah,
it was so great. I loved him.
And, there are phenomenal filmmakers that get their start that way. And I think Joe is going to be very successful.
Yeah.
Well, and I love this too, like, because I feel like we're all kind of like this a little bit. It's like we all are hungry and we want to create. And I love that just like feral desire to just, I need to make something. I need to get my art out there. And I don't know, I think it's very clear of like our Midwestern scene, which makes me happy.
I think so.
But before I get too far away from the Salvages quick, because I am going to have like kind of a bigger, broader question. But I am curious, speaking of Midwestern scene, speaking of like Iowa and also the Salvages, how has the film been received? Because obviously there's a queer story in this.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very religious elements. And, we tend to have like fairly conservative audiences every once in a while. How has the film been received?
Surprisingly well. I actually was expecting a lot more pushback than I got. I will say, to be totally honest, it hasn't gotten into a lot of festivals, and that's fine. At the end of the day, that's not, I do this to show it off. And I do have some more public screenings planned for the future. But, other than that, I haven't gotten really any like big negative pushback. At least nobody said it to my face. I think that I really think it's a testament to the actors. Cause I think they just played it so naturally and so believably that like maybe even if you don't agree with everything that you're seeing or think something is right or wrong, you can at least feel for these people going through this. And also, I really did make a concerted effort to make it as broad as I could without pulling any punches of the story. Where, at the end of the day, to me, the Salvages isn't really about religion. The Salvages is about power. So, it's a religious setting, but I'm not trying to sit here and say anything about religion other than that it's another way for a certain kind of people to use their power over others, which I think is a fairly low controversy thing to say. But no, overall the response has been positive. I didn't really get the pearl clutching I expected, which I'm thrilled about. I'm glad that it's been connecting with people. But yeah, overall it's been pretty widely received.
I wanted to ask a little bit. I noticed there was some intimacy in the film. Stephanie Schneider, very familiar name. We're going to have an episode coming up where we have 3 different intimacy coordinators that are going to be on the show, and we're going to talk about intimacy in film. And I've got a picture coming. It's going to have a little bit of intimacy, not a lot, a little bit. And about that, I want to talk about how that was approached, how your actors felt about your intimacy coordinator. Can you talk about that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I will say I've kind of become the intimacy in film person, which is fun. But to me, it's a fact of life, and it is the most, for lack of a better word, intimate interaction that can happen between 2 characters. Especially, it's the end of the world. What are you going to do? And to me, my approach is always just to not shy away from it from a production standpoint or a writing standpoint. So the intimacy that was on screen was fully in the script, written the way that you would write an action scene, for instance, where it's just that this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. So there's no not to be crass, but it's not you look at the script and and then they have sex. It's not written that way. It's very deliberate. And the reason for that is then I can send the script to anyone who's interested and say, okay, this is exactly what is expected to be in the film. And obviously there's flexibility. I'm always willing to work with what people are comfortable with, but it's more that you really have to try not to surprise anybody or to make anybody think, oh, it's going to be this, and then you get to set and it's this. So we just approached it very deliberately. We talked about it a lot. We established boundaries, and again, Stephanie does an excellent job with all of that. And then we kind of just shot it like we would shoot any other scene. To be honest, it wasn't a particularly difficult shoot, other than that it required more creative camera angles than anything else that we did. So from a technical standpoint, it was a little more difficult, but it wasn't particularly awkward or uncomfortable because it was just very professional and very dry, other than the fact that we were portraying something that was sensitive. We had a lot of fun with it. We laughed about it. We just shot it like anything.
And I love that too, especially putting it in the script is as action. Because so often I see scripts and it just says, oh, and it's just, they have sex. They do this, they do that.
Yeah.
And I love, though, the idea of, this is what you need to expect as an actor, and also for the reader as well. Just in general, because as a producer, if I'm reading this even beyond the actors, I want to know what I need to expect if I'm producing a film. What should be expected? Is this going to be, a liability issue? What do I need to expect as a producer? And then, because, you never know. And that's really important to have those things just open, outright, having the conversation without, it doesn't need to be awkward. It's part of the story. It's storytelling. It's life.
Yeah. And I will say, too, that is my approach to everything. Not just with intimacy, but, whenever I write a script, I'm very particular and very detailed when I write action within a script. Because to me, actors are going to bring their own characteristics, their own styles to the roles that they portray. But the action, the meat of the story, the what's happening is what I'm thinking about. And so that's where I'm honestly the most specific, is kind of with the descriptions and the moment to moment stuff within, especially with a story like The Salvages, where it is so, particular.
Well, and I think we had a table read for the new script I had done, and it's interesting about the attitudes of actors when it comes to intimacy. I asked everyone, I said, does this feel too salacious? Is it too, and all of the cast said, no, not at all.
Some said there should be more.
One of the guys said, I think it's a little too hot, but yet the girls in the script, like, it's not, I had a couple say it's not hot enough. So that was the thing that I thought was very interesting. And I think now that we have like Bridgerton and some of these other things, I think maybe we do have people that are a little bit more open to intimacy on screen than we were a few years ago. I think it's maybe coming a little bit more of, and I don't think we're ever going to be like Europe, but I mean a little bit more comfortable with it. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, well,
what do you think?
I've always thought we had it backwards with intimacy and violence when it comes to how we censor things. We've historically been much more shy about showing intimacy or even non-sexual, like nudity or things like that on screen than we are about like horrific violence. And as someone who purveys in both, I just find that interesting. To me, it's all relative. It all depends on the context of a scene. Like, frankly, I don't worry too much about whether something I write, whether it's intimacy, whether it's violence, whether it's anything, is like too much or not enough or anything like that, because it just is what it is. It's as much as needs to be in the story. So other than like obviously not wanting to be offensive in a way that is like actually offensive. But I think that my team does a pretty good job of avoiding that. And the few times I've ever had to be reined in, it wasn't so much that like I wrote something that was like, oh, you can't put that on screen. It's usually more just that like I'll read something and think, there's a subtler way, or there's a different way of portraying this moment. And sometimes that also happens organically as you're shooting. Sometimes there will be something in the script where you get there and either for a practical or a technical or a storytelling reading, you think maybe there's a better way to do this. For instance, with the Salvages, actually. This is a violence-related moment, not an intimacy-related moment. In the script, Holting was supposed to get his throat cut with the bottle, so it would look more like the painting. And we got there, and it was just like, it wasn't so much that we were like, oh, this is too much. It was actually that we thought from an effects standpoint, we don't have the means of doing this in a way that isn't going to look like all of a sudden this became an 80s slasher movie. So it's like, I don't want to break the tension by almost making it feel cheesy. So how can we do this in a way that feels just as intense and personal without having to worry about an effect that we can't make look good? And I think that being willing to kind of kill your darlings in moments like that or rethink moments like that for the service of the story is important.
And that's important too, especially like as independent filmmakers, because we don't have huge budgets. We don't have a lot of access, especially, if you have a smaller crew, if you have a smaller effects team. And I think it's so important to be able to like keep that in mind. And obviously, like with intimacy, it's like, okay, yeah, like we're keeping in mind what is the comfortability, what are we able to do, what are the actors able to do, but also just like in practicality of effects, like what can we do here on set right now? It's such an important thing to keep in mind.
Well, and thinking about that scene too, is this, Shelby and I had a really big discussion yesterday about characters and intentionality. The intentionality is all there. I don't think it would have been that different. I think it's there. I think it's equally tight as long as the intentionality is there. And I think that's everything.
Yeah.
Well, and it's cool too because it's something that you're putting your own spin on it too, and it's your own interpretation. And it creates something, especially because it's like, okay, we're tearing the sheets and we're going to create like it follows the story very well, and it's really beautiful, and especially using the red. It's
that was our exact thought. It was like it almost evokes the same image, but in a way that it's almost another layer of adaptation there, where it's like we've kind of created something more evocative rather than something that mimics. And
this is your own.
So
I do. So getting into this a little bit, going to gender. So I think this is fascinating, and you and I, we've had these conversations before.
Yes.
But your film production house is called Matriarch Films. You are a trans filmmaker, and you have a cast in the Salvages that is predominantly women. I want to talk a little bit about how gender impacts you as an artist, the idea and the concepts around gender, and how it impacts your art in general as well.
I don't write stories necessarily to make a point about gender. And yet, conversely, it's all I think about when I'm writing. You know, like because to me, like, art, when it's good, comes from your deepest self. I largely discovered I was transgender through my art, through what I wrote, through what fascinated me, through what I connected with. That was one of the major kind of moments for me that I was like, yeah, I'm really, really interested by these stories and I really connect with these in a certain way. So I can't possibly say that anything in my art isn't related to my gender or just kind of the concept of femininity in general. But at the same time, like, I don't necessarily try to create stories that preach. I certainly don't try to portray anybody as being better or cleaner than anybody else. My stories tend to be about characters that are pretty morally gray all the way around, because that's what I find the most interesting. And I also think, frankly, sometimes there's a lack of, not so much now, it's gotten a lot better now, but historically there has been a certain lack of complicated, morally gray, queer characters actually written by queer people. A lot of the time, the best queer villains or queer complicated characters, especially in horror, were not written by queer. And again, that's not so much today. Like, we're living in the era of Julia Ducournau and Titane and Love Lies Bleeding and all these great films. And which is why I feel like this is the perfect time to be doing what I'm doing. But, there is a marked period of history, both in film and especially in the horror genre, where queer people really didn't get to tell their own stories. So, I don't know if that's so much an answer or more just like a series of thoughts. But yeah, and it is a big part of what I do. And I do go out of my way to cast primarily women and queer people in my films. I mean, that is something I am very open about, so.
Well, and that's something I think about all the time. And, like, I was thinking about characters the other day, and it's like, I have such a hard time thinking about, like, okay, I'm going to make this character, she's going to be a woman, and then what I immediately attach to her, it's like, I don't even, like, it's without thought. It's like, oh yeah, I should probably create this conflict because this is a woman. It's just like more of like an instant reaction of, this is the story that it should be. And I have a very hard time sometimes, because I think there's that expectation of, like, when we're creating queer characters, and especially like queer women in stories, that they have to have a very specific storyline, have very specific trauma, have specific conflict. And I think it's because we've had, the representation we've had, it hasn't been them. They're not telling their stories. And we get stuck in these tropes of, okay, well, this is what a queer woman should look like on screen. But what that queer woman looks like on screen isn't an actual queer woman, because she wasn't writing that story. Yeah. And I love the power, especially like watching the Salvages and watching your art, because there is so much power in that, because it feels personal. You can feel that this is a different voice than what has been established. And it's so needed, it's so necessary. And I love that. And it's very validating to know that I'm not the only person thinking about like gender within that space, because I feel like it's such a thing. We just don't talk about it. It's something that is talked about, like, within, especially like on a local scene. We don't talk about those things going into our films. It's that thing of, oh, this could be either a male or a female character and it doesn't matter, like that. And that's feminism. It's something so much deeper than that and so much rawer than that. And I love that. I love that you're breaking that mold here.
It's good.
Yeah. And that is, there's a reason I called it Matriarch Films. It's like, it's not just to, make myself sound cool. Like, it's really more about the fact that I tend to seat power with the feminine, and I, frankly, especially in the horror genre, there are, frankly, most of my favorite horror filmmakers are women, but it's still a very male-dominated genre and a very masculine genre on top of it.
Yep.
And so to be able to say, like, to be able to make simultaneously the most upsetting horror films that anyone sees and the queerest and most feminine horror films anyone sees is really something I admire.
Well,
And I obviously I say that mostly sarcastically, but you know, it is a way to play with power and play with the dynamics of power in a way that I find enjoyable.
and I love too, like, you calling your production house Matriarch Films is so cool, because there is such a power in that, because it is the matriarch, and it's calling so much of like a positive, powerful attention to you as a filmmaker, which is really cool. And I don't know, it's just not something that I think we're seeing it more, but I love seeing you like really leading that wave on like at a Midwestern basis. I think it's so cool. This
Yeah,
is
I
to
mean,
me like, but I love Carrsan.
no, okay, like think about it, like, for the record, all the same, back to you. But like, it's something I think we don't always talk about, or we don't always say out loud. When we go to film festivals, every single one of us is acting. We are all portraying whatever we think the filmmaker version of ourselves is. We're hiding our insecurities, we're portraying ourselves as the way that we want to be seen. So calling it Matriarch Films is almost a way of a wink at that to me, of just like, it's not really that I think I'm the greatest or anything like that, but like, it's a way of saying not only do I think my films have quality, but it's also a way of saying, like, right from the beginning, here's who I am, this is what my films are, you're gonna see something now. Like, those are, you know, and even the logo that my amazing partner Rose designed, like, it's deliberately provocative, it's deliberately in your face and evocative, and it makes people feel something, and so it's like, it's not so much trying to be edgy, but it is trying to make a point. And that is something that I think all of my work does, makes you feel something.
I love that.
Well, on the topic of all of your work, what's coming up next? And then also we need to know where people can find you and where people can find this fantastic film.
Yes. So what is coming next? I am hesitant to fully name what is coming next, because I literally just today, an hour before this, I had my first meeting with the cinematographer for this project. And I am like over the moon excited. I can say that I'm trying to do a lot more from a production standpoint with this than I've ever done. I'm going to be doing fundraising. I'm going to be seeking producers, all of it. I will say that I am planning to return to a story I have done before in a better way. It's something that I've been working on for a long time, and it's going to be a proof of concept short, more than likely, that I'm going to be shooting within the next 6 to 8 months. So, yeah. I don't want to quite come all out and say what it's going to be and what it's going to be about yet, because I'm still working on the script. I'm still kind of refining it, but it's going to be really, really, really. And I've got some amazingly talented people attached.
And where can we find you?
I am Matriarch Films Iowa on pretty much everything. I think just Matriarch Films on Instagram. But if you search Matriarch Films Iowa, I'm everywhere. Also, just search my name because it's spelled weirdly, so I'm easy to find. It's Carrsan. You'll find me. I have blue hair. I stick out. I'm very comfortable with people just sending me a friend request. I'm working on putting together a Vimeo or a YouTube page, one of the two, that will have everything on it. That's still kind of a work in progress, because a lot of things are also still in festivals. Like, I keep saying, oh, I'm done with the festival run, and then I enter them in something else. So I'm making everyone else wait. But pretty soon, I would say within the next 2 months or so, that'll be live. The Salvages probably won't be publicly available for a while yet, because I have at least one big public viewing in the works right now, probably 2 within the next 6 months. So there will definitely be more chances to see it, but it's not going to be like online anywhere for a while yet. But yeah, also working on some short films. I'm gonna, I'm gonna have like 15 things going on at all times. So yeah.
Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate having you on the show. As always, it's absolutely fantastic, and we just wanted to let everybody know to tune in 2 weeks for another one of our fantastic episodes here on the Depth of Film podcast on all of your favorite platforms. So again, Carrsan, thank you for being with us today. We'll see everybody next time.
Thank you for listening to Depth of Field, and check us out on YouTube and Spotify, where we post new episodes every 2 weeks.